Joined now by Nicole Auerbach of USA Today Sports. Nicole, you and I spoke on Friday. At that point, we both agreed the school and the players appeared to be at an impasse. It seemed unlikely then that they would play in the bowl game next week. Based on your understanding, what happened in between Friday afternoon and early Saturday morning?
Well, I think there were lots of meetings from all sides, and athletic director and coaches and players. And I think that also between the time we spoke and now, you know, the report came out and it was made public by a local TV station. And I think that once the other teammates were able to read some of the details that were pretty horrifying to read, I think anyone who read even parts of it noticed that. You know, I think they just wanted to make sure what they were arguing for, and maybe that the boycott, the way that they were doing it, was not the best way to do it. So I think that there were just conversations, understanding, and trying to figure out different ways where they could address some of their issues with due process and the Title IX process without doing it so publicly that it felt like airing dirty laundry.
Well, Nicole, now that we've heard Tracy Claeys speak, and he did use that term, due process, but he also made it very clear he has 4 nieces. He is not going to in any way support any type of sexual assault type incident. He's made a donation on the behalf of one of those type of organizations. What do you make of Claeys when he finally decided to speak publicly on this issue?
Well, I think he made sense of what we were kind of trying to make sense, which was, why would you openly and publicly support your players with a tweet like that if maybe this was the wrong hill for them to die on? This was a wrong issue that was read a certain way, and it read as people kind of putting pressure on or not believing sexual assault victims. So I think that was also part of why the boycott was ended. That is an impression it gives off, even if they're trying to explain they're doing it for due process issues involving the whole investigation process. It doesn't come off that way. So I think that that's been part of the aftermath, and certainly Coach Claeys trying to make clear that they support victims of sexual assault. They want these investigations to be taken seriously, and they don't want their protests being linked with people who do pressure victims or don't want people to report. So I think that's been very important, and they've been trying to make that clear in the aftermath.
And there have been some sources, unconfirmed, that have said that Tracy Claeys did bring up the fact that this boycott could cost him his job, brought that up to his team. Again, those have not been confirmed. What do you think the effect could be on Tracy Claeys' future with Minnesota?
Well, that's a really interesting point, and I think he certainly does realize that when you do tweet something like that. And what was really interesting in the Star Tribune, they were quoting a regent who was talking about how a coach does have to say something publicly like that. A coach does have to back his players in a certain sense, because otherwise, when this is over, and obviously it's going to end either way, who is going to play for you if you don't have your back in something like this, which against these players involving the extra 5 players who got added into the suspensions that were not involved in the police investigation, they viewed this as a due process issue, and they did not mean for it to blow up the way it did, but they thought what they were standing on was solid. And if you're a coach and you don't stand up for them, and if you suspend them and you disconnect from your players, then they're never going to want to play for you again. And so I think the regents and people involved in decision-making at the school understand that. But yes, it's a very high-risk situation either way. And I think Tracy Claeys understood that. There was really a no-win. You either have your administration's back or you have your players back, and you get caught in the middle. So I think that that's, again, as moving forward, you're going to have to try to repair a lot of relationships and have a lot of conversations with both sides.
And this is about more than just Tracy Claeys' future. It's about the football program's future as a whole, and also about the university's future, Nicole, because when you look back, there was a basketball incident involving a videotape, players suspended, expelled a year ago as well. When December 28th rolls around and the Holiday Bowl is now in the rearview mirror, what's the next step for the future of the University of Minnesota athletics?
Well, I think what you should do is what a lot of high-profile schools are doing, especially in the aftermath of high-profile sexual harassment or sexual assault issues. Bring in someone like a Brenda Tracy, who has become the most prominent sexual assault survivor voice in college football. She's been meeting with various teams, keeping relationships going with coaching staffs, and coming through, telling her story of when she was gang raped in 1998 at Oregon State. And sharing what that's like, what it's like when people, when even the charges were dropped, and what that means. Does that mean nothing happened? How do you go about living, surviving every day after something like that happens, and explaining to college athletes what consent is, what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when you bring in something like that and you really make that an emphasis and an effort in your off season and even in season education, that's what's going to help change the culture across the board in college football. But I think especially after going through something like this, where consent was such an important piece of this and understanding what that looks like on both sides from male and female perspective, that's important, and that's what they need to focus on in educating them in the offseason.
Really good perspective from Nicole Auerbach of USA Today Sports. As always, Nicole, we appreciate the time.
All right, thanks for having me.